prospect with integrity, we will get customers who have integrity. Integrity is the foundation from which everything is built on.
You better understand value. But at the end of the day, sales is a relationship business. It is a people business. It is an emotional business.
This is Sales Logic.
This is Sales Logic, the show where we dive into the strategies, discuss the steps, everything that you need to know to close more deals. It is 8 a.m. Saturday morning, time for a Sales Logic. Hanging out here with my partner, Mark Hunter. Mark, had a good week?
Had a great week. And, we were talking beforehand, talking conversation. There's a lot of things. We could do a pre-show. No, we won't do a show. The show today, we're going to be talking about best strategies for onboarding new sales professionals. Lightning round. Hey, get this. Top 10 qualities of a successful sales professional. So I want to stick around for that one. So, okay, best strategies for onboarding new sales professionals. What do you think?
I was wondering, and I don't know the answer to this, but I was wondering on the stats of how long it takes a brand new sales professional to start producing. I'm sure that is a little different within industry, or how many sales professionals don't make it, in that piece. But if I had to start with onboarding, I think first of all, you have to take it really seriously. People far too often, companies hire somebody with a track record, or they hire somebody with a set of contacts. And I can't tell you how many times that we've hired people with a set of contacts and they come into your industry and it's not very valuable. It's not very helpful. You've got to hire somebody with the desire to sell. But I think the most important thing that you need to do in onboarding is sit them down and deeply discuss the target market. Because if you don't discuss your quote unquote bullseye, they're going to be out looking for business that was the bullseye of the last company they worked for.
That's really key, getting zeroed in on who the customer is, because from that, then you can set up the product knowledge training and everything else. And because this is the big thing that I see companies do, is they hire new salespeople and they throw all this product knowledge at them. And that is like 80% of the onboarding. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't cut it. I want to give people product knowledge, but then it's got to be the skill set. What is the value proposition? What's the communication process? How is it that we're going to be interacting with that ideal customer? Just what you said up front. That is so spot on. And I want to go back and address something, because you said every salesperson. I'm experiencing this right now with a company that I happen to be working with, and I'm bringing in all these contacts and so forth. Okay, those are great, but you know what? They rarely ever pay out. They rarely. If you hire somebody based on the book of business they can bring, you are making a big, giant mistake. That's a whole separate show. But anyway, hey, I love Mike's comment. I've heard 18 months, if they are in the same industry, that seems long to me. 18 months to get going. That is way too long. I'll tell you what, if people can't get traction within 30, 45 days, and traction is engaging conversations minimally, and that's for a long sales cycle. For a short sales cycle, they should be closing deals within 60 days, period. If they can't, then we got the wrong person. And again, it's going to vary by industry. It's going to vary by sales cycle and so forth. But I'll tell you what, you got to be seeing a path. You got to be seeing breadcrumbs. You got to be seeing things happening that says this person is starting to connect with potential customers.
Yeah, so I would say, when I onboarded my salesperson, the first thing we did was really, really clearly define my target market, who we were going to be going after. The second is, I think you need to hand them the sales process. You need to cleanly know what networking events to attend to, how many calls they need to make a week, how many of those calls need to turn into a second call, how many proposals you expect to write a month, and how many proposals you expect to close, and how many proposals you expect to lose in order for them to land deals. Like I'm a really good salesperson. And if I came to work for any single one of you, I don't know how to close deals in your company, because you have to have figured out the recipe and hand them. And then from there, like with what Mark is talking about, them getting traction, I think it's always squishy. I don't know how long it's going to take somebody to quote unquote close a deal. So when I onboard them, what I want to track is their behaviors. I mean, I think onboarding is a micromanagement process. If Mark came to work for me tomorrow, I'm going to micromanage him. We're going to sit down every week, probably a couple times a week. I want to see who he's calling on, how it's going, what's happening in those conversations, and if he's following the process. Because if he is not closing deals, I need to understand whether it's a skill issue or a discipline issue. A discipline issue, I fire. A skill issue is natural for a brand new salesperson. Selling in your company is different than selling someplace else.
That's exactly. The manager has got to lay those things out exactly. Right now, I'm working with 2 different companies where we happen to be having onboarding of salespeople right now. And in both those situations, they have week 1 goals, week 2 goals, week 3 goals, week 4 goals, all the way through to week 8. And they're very specific metrics in terms of what they should be working on, what they should be doing. First week was just acclimation to the company and the product. Week 2, a little bit more acclimation, but then really understanding who that customer is and starting to create phone calls, starting to get going. Week 3, almost 80% of the time spent really prospecting, selling, talking to existing customers, talking to new customers, starting to make that, and you keep making that transition to where eventually by about week 6, they're kind of free flying. They're kind of flying on their own. And if they can't fly on their own, then guess what? Now, that's not mean they're closing sales, but it means we're seeing repetitive activities happening. And that is so key. Sales managers, you can't just hire them and let them go, but you also can't hire them and then hover over them for months on end. You've got to slowly release and let them fly.
Yeah, I love what Thomas is saying here, helping them find their way. We need to know what they want to do in sales. That will be a starting point for the direction that we want to take them. I love that. I love that point, Thomas. I got to add here what Bill says, that Mark needs micromanaging. I mean, you have no idea, Bill. I've got to micromanage him. But back to Thomas here. When I used to hire salespeople, I would always say, what's your idea of a perfect day? If you could come into here and do anything, tell me what you would want to do. And it's such a good question, because any good salesperson doesn't want to do paperwork and has no desire to be into the office. They probably won't even show up to the office first. And anybody who tells you that, they want to get things organized, they want to make sure that they've dotted the I's and crossed their T's, they're a better skinner than they are a hunter. So I think it's a really good observation.
There's something else there in terms, you got to understand the communication style between the salesperson being hired and their manager. And again, is this a remote location? Is this work from home? Is this in an office? All these factors come into play. But it's important that the 2 parties have a very strong correlation. In other words, initially, there's going to be probably a daily phone call. If this person's remote and the manager's remote, there's going to be kind of a daily phone call just for that first week or 2, just to kind of get things up and going. And again, it's just making sure that the manager is reinforcing, my whole job is I want to see you succeed, and I want to see you succeed fast. I'm going to share with you ideas. I'm going to share with you strategies. But that's the other key piece. The manager has got to let the salesperson's personality come through. Because again, you can't put them into a box and say you're going to behave exactly this way every day. Now, there are processes that have to be followed. But again, what I found is that if I allow a person's personality to come through and their style of work, in other words, if they're work from home, they may have kids at home. So they say, you know what, I can't really start work until like 8:30. Fine. There may be somebody else says, I want to start work at 7. Fine. You in a work from home situation, and again, this is going to vary if they're a W-2 or a 1099, big differences, because a 1099 in the United States, that is basically a person who you cannot really specifically tell them what to do. You cannot tell them what to do. W-2, they're an employee. You can hire, fire, et cetera, et cetera. you can tell them specifically what to do. So again, it's going to vary, and it's going to vary by state, depending on where you are in the US and even in Canada and Europe.
So, Mark, do you think that it is different onboarding somebody who's virtual versus somebody who's in person? And should you bring virtual people in to onboard them?
Yes, I think there's a huge difference because, again, I'm hiring different traits. If they're a virtual employee, I need somebody who has demonstrated to me that they can work on their own, that they can kind of self-motivate themselves. If they're in an office environment, I got to make sure that they're kind of a team player. So again, there are different personalities and different traits I'm looking for depending on it. But initially, I'm going to try to have that virtual person be in the office, connect with somebody. If you've got to get on an airplane, get on an airplane, but make that happen. Why? Because it's creating culture. It's creating the environment for that person to understand this is what the business, this is what the company's all about. And that is extremely key. But I'll tell you what, it comes down to this. You said it right at the beginning. Do they have the attitude? Do they have the attitude to do the job? And I'll tell you what, very early on, you got to give them enough rope to let them do what they want to do. And you got to be seeing, are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? Or they,
Yeah, and you know that pretty quickly. Like really, if you really structure a 30, 60, 90, you know at the end of 30 days whether this is going to work or whether it isn't going to work. I love what Brandon is saying here. They need to deeply understand the challenge they are facing that you solve, how it affects each stakeholder, and the impact of not fixing that problem. Right, Brandon, because what they're selling isn't a product. What they're selling is solving a problem. Mark, what's our question for today?
Yes, question comes from Steve in Atlanta. He says, I'm a senior executive in a large manufacturing corporation. I handle the Eastern region. We're struggling with our salespeople. More than 40% are not hitting quota. We must redo our sales training, but wondering if you have any thoughts.
Wow,
I threw it into the brain, but I'll tell you what, here's two things that the brain came back. Sales logic brain. If you're part of the mastermind, you get access to this brain credible knowledge bank created by Meridith and myself. Two things that really stand out. You got to be integrating marketing and sales because you really got to question, is marketing and sales truly integrated? Vast majority of companies that I work with, and I know you do too, you see that marketing's over here and sales over there. They're not integrated. And the second piece is understanding the market. Because many times what happens is a process was created for a previous time, a previous era, a previous market that doesn't exist today. So you really got to understand what's the market happening right now and how do we adapt? How do we change to that?
Yeah, you know, I think this is so interesting. I mean, my first thought when I hear this question is why? Can you specifically tell me why your salespeople are not performing? And the only two reasons of why they're not performing is it's a discipline issue or a skill issue. And if they are not working a process, you know, we put micromanagement in such a negative box, and it isn't a negative. Now micromanaging a top performer is ridiculous. It's irritating them and it's a waste of your time. But when somebody is underperforming, you need to get in there and you need to understand why. And when you're underperforming, it's like living with your parents when you're a kid. You have to do what your parents say, right? You've decided to take their money. You've decided to live in their house rent free. So you have to do what they say. It's the same way when you're underperforming as a salesperson. So I'm basically going to give you a process and say, here is our recipe for how to succeed, and follow this recipe and you will be successful. And they either follow that recipe and they aren't successful, or they don't follow that recipe and they aren't successful. If they don't follow the recipe and they aren't successful, get them off your team. If they don't follow the recipe and they aren't, if they do follow the recipe and they aren't successful, there's a skill issue in there. Maybe they're focused at the wrong target. Their conversational skills are bad. They don't know how to move it to close, but you have to figure out what's happening in there.
You know, when you look at the skill, I look at also what are the activities. In other words, how, and again, this, I hate to say this, but it's a little bit of a metric thing in terms of how many calls are they making, how many conversations are they having, those types of things. And one of the easiest ways to do that is by putting them together with an accountability partner. Have them with somebody who is going to come alongside them, who hey, they maybe came on board a year or two ago. They're up and running, and you align the two together, because here's what's going to happen. The new person is going to be able to ask that veteran questions and just be able to become much more comfortable, because they're probably going to wind up mirroring many of the aspects that veteran salesperson does. So again, this becomes to give you a really good clue as to whether or not this person is playing. I love Natalie's comment. What's the salesperson's superpower? Find out what their superpower is and make sure they have the support to achieve. I love that, because every salesperson's got something that they excel at. And you know what? Compliment them on that. Compliment them and let them build that up, because that's going to help their motivation. That's going to help their drive. And ultimately, they're going to achieve far more for you. I love that.
Yeah. I love Roberta here. A person's true personality will be attractive and magnetic. It's so true. Exactly what Mark said. So Thomas is weighing back in here. If salespeople are motivated by money, and who isn't these days, we need to show them how they will get paid to a T. A lot of salespeople don't understand this key piece of info. You know, Thomas, I'm even going to take that a step further. I think one of the most important things that salespeople need to know is how the company makes money, because I can't tell you how much I have sold deals that actually lose the company money. When I was a banker, I used to sell lines of credit all the time. Well, lines of credit don't make the bank money if they don't fund. And I didn't know that. I didn't understand that. Those little intricacies. And Bill King weighs in, salespeople make me micromanage them if they fail to produce.
Oh, I love that, Bill. Thank you so much. Hey, that comment regarding how the company makes money is so key, because that comes back into pricing. Because again, salespeople are very quick to try to challenge pricing and so forth. If they understand how the company makes money, the margins, all of those types of things, it is amazing at how that can really impact and allow me to feel much more confident about the price. Hey, Roberta, another mastermind member, Bill King, mastermind member. She says, in my experience, it's often a relationship between the boss and the direct report that isn't aligned and is influencing performance. Oh man, you and I have talked about this. I've shared those nightmare bosses I've had and those superstar bosses I've had, because again, it is amazing at how the relationship you have with your boss drives your performance. And this is why I've seen so many salespeople get fired from one company, go to work for another company, and become a superstar. Did they suddenly take a drug? No, it was just they happen to be now in a different culture with a different boss. And it's amazing at how big of a difference that can make. Yeah.
You know, I wonder too, like, what do you think about giving brand new salespeople some easy wins, maybe some low-hanging, some low-hanging fruit?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, I want to see success early. In other words, don't sit there and throw the most difficult account at them right away. No, allow them achieve success. Momentum, success creates success. And it's amazing that if I can achieve a little bit of success, I get a little bit of wins. Now, this isn't about just keeping them in the easy lane forever. You got to scale them up. You've got to ramp them up. But to allow them to have some easy wins, and that might be some conversations with some existing customers. That might be some of those things. But again, they've got to kind of feel like, yeah, I can do this. I can make this happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I love what Mike is saying here. I'm not sold on money being the primary driver. Yes, salespeople need to be paid and paid well. Absolutely right. But I think they need to be bought into the mission and the vision of the company, which gets back to bringing people on. Like, do they buy into the vision? Are they bought into the mission? Do they align with your values? Are they right from that standpoint? I read one of the most interesting pieces of research I've read in a long time this week. It was talking about why military veterans, tend to fail when they come into the traditional workplace. And the reason was because, think about this. These are some of the most dedicated, committed people. They are not paid well. So why can't they make that transition? And the research revealed that the reason is that they want to join the military. They join the military. They sacrifice their personal lives. They're not paid well because they have a deep mission. And the mission is to protect the United States of America and to protect the citizens. And then they come out into the workplace, and all we talk about is the job. We tell them to go from saving the United States of America to putting a widget in a hole. Companies don't have a vision and a mission. And without purpose, they really struggle to commit because they had purpose before. So I think you're so on target with that.
Well, that comes back to something that I love doing, and that is a new hire has got to be able to connect with senior level people. And again, if you connect them with the CEO, somebody senior in the company, again, it's allowing them to understand the full 360 perspective of what the company is all about. Because again, if I can understand what the CEO is working on, how they're working on, and there's just something about a new hire. If I'm a new hire and I'm able to have breakfast with the CEO, or I'm able to connect with them, or maybe I can't physically do it, but it's just simply a phone call or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. That can go a long ways to creating ownership, because at the end of the day, sales is an emotional job. It's not checking boxes. We were talking earlier about the number of phone calls, making emails. Yeah, that's an activity. But I'll tell you what, it's an emotional game, because I can put two people on the same call with the same customer. One's going to be successful, one isn't. Why? Because of the attitude and the perspective that the latter person has versus the former person.
Yeah, I love this, Bill. You throw new people a few leads that I find on my own so they can learn the process. Natalie is dead on. Sales is solving a challenge that adds value and helps the client grow. Mark, we are burning time. We better hit the book and the lightning round.
Book, lightning round. Hire right, fire less, from Kelly Riggs. Kelly Riggs, I love the guy because he just has a little edge about how he feels about hiring and training. Hire right, fire less by Kelly Riggs.
What I love about this book is the fact that the biggest mistake I see owners, business owners, sales managers make is they're trying to fix a salesperson that can't be fixed. If they don't align to the vision, like Mike said, if they're not willing to work the process, if they don't buy into your values, give up and move on. So it's a really good book to outline that. All right.
Okay, lightning round. Top 10 qualities of a successful sales professional.
Number one, I think you have to be resilient. I think you have to sort of be fine with rejection and understand this is a game of how much you get back up.
Number two, model mayor. No, I won't say that. Anyway, time management. It's time management. You've got to be able to control your day.
Yeah. Number three, I think you need to be curious. I mean, you have to genuinely want to learn about other people and about businesses.
With that, I'm going to add to that, it's continuous learning, not only about your customers, but really the skill set. You got to be continuously learning about how to improve your skills.
Yeah, I think you need to be a problem solver. I think you need to be somebody who really wants to help people solve a problem.
Along with that, you've got to take ownership. You have to take ownership of what's happening out there. You got to take ownership of the relationships, ownership of your job.
You have to be somebody who, I think you do have to be organized. I mean, I think you have to work your CRM, somebody who understands to follow up, those types of things.
Optimistic attitude. I'll tell you what, you cannot be successful unless you are a true optimist through and through.
Yeah, you have to understand the difference between productive and busy and stay focused on productive and not worry about the busy.
You got to be adaptable, because again, things change. There may be times when you've got to completely change your schedule to fit something in, but you've got to be adaptable to it. Are we at I think you're at like number 9, right?
Let's just say number 9. I think number 9 is that you have to be disciplined and self-motivated. You have to be somebody who doesn't need somebody else telling you what to do.
Number 10, it's about building relationships. You got to be willing to build relationships out there. Hey, love what we've been talking about here today. And should we tell people about the Sales Logic Mastermind? Sure, why not? Mastermind, not only the group to join, but also the expert exchange. The 4th Monday of each month, we have a great person who comes in and shares with us. You got some thoughts on that real quick?
Yeah, I would not miss the Sales Logic Expert Exchange. Just put down the 4th Monday of every single month, 4 Eastern. The lineup of experts we have coming in the next couple of months, it is just impressive. Why would you walk away from free tips, free learning on every single subject that you could, that you could possibly engage with? So mark your calendar now. And if you want to hit your sales goals this year, heck, if you want to exceed them, think about joining the Sales Logic Mastermind. We'd love to have you here.
And you can find out about both by going to saleslogicpodcast.com. With that, we want to say thank you for listening to Sales Logic this week. If you like what you hear, subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast app. If something we've said has earned you a single dollar, consider telling a friend, because it's how we grow when we help you grow. I'm Mark Hunter.
And I'm Meridith Elliott Powell.
Remember, when you sell with confidence and integrity,
all of this uncertainty suddenly becomes your competitive advantage.
And the sale becomes logical.
All right. We'll see you right back here next week, 8 a.m. Eastern, for another episode of Sales Logic. Until then, go close a deal.